Hello everyone, welcome to Diplomatic Commentary. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs announced on May 7th that Vice Premier He Lifeng will visit Switzerland from May 9th to 12th, during which talks will be held with the US side. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian said that the US has recently been expressing a desire to negotiate with China, and this meeting is being held at the request of the US. China firmly opposes the US's arbitrary imposition of tariffs, and this position has not changed. Lin Jian pointed out that China has also repeatedly stated that it is open to dialogue, but any dialogue must be based on equality, respect, and reciprocity. Any form of pressure or coercion will not work on China. China will resolutely safeguard its legitimate interests and uphold international fairness and justice. Meanwhile, US Treasury Secretary Bessent said in an interview with Fox News that this meeting represents the first step taken by both sides. Bessent claimed that the meeting is not more likely to reach an agreement, but it helps to ease the situation. He said, "My sense is that the meeting will focus on easing tensions rather than discussing a major trade agreement. But before we move forward, we must ease the tensions." In fact, since US President Trump launched the tariff war, he has repeatedly claimed that Chinese officials have reached out to the US, but China has consistently denied this. Before departing, Bessent was interviewed by Fox News, during which the host asked him, who made the first call, the US or China? Is it like a date? Bessent started to stammer a bit, saying, about that, there were many calls. There's no such thing as who called first. Over time, there have been many points of contact between the US and China. Bessent's response was described by outsiders as evasive. In fact, Bessent has achieved a certain level of success in the financial sector and is well aware of the US economic situation. In Trump's cabinet, he is considered a normal elite. Deep down, he knows that Trump's tariff war is unsustainable, and he is well aware that Trump's frequent claims that China is reaching out to the US are exaggerations. However, he has to follow Trump's external rhetoric, knowing full well that these statements are exaggerations, yet he can't bring himself to say them, which leads to his stammering. This awkward situation had already occurred a day earlier. On May 6th, American media outlets such as CNN and The New Republic reported that during an oversight hearing held by the House Financial Services Committee, Bessent, who was trying to defend Trump's economic policies, was at a loss when it came to the question of who pays the additional tariffs. Democratic Representative Mark Pocan from Wisconsin directly hit the mark by asking, "Mr. Secretary, who exactly pays the tariffs?" As soon as the words were spoken, Bessent immediately appeared a bit flustered, looking completely at a loss. When people feel awkward, they tend to act busy, and Bessent was no exception. In his panic, he instinctively wanted to clutch his fingers to hide his nervousness. But the pen in his hand got in the way, so he had no choice but to use his other hand to unplug a microphone in an attempt to ease the awkwardness. After this series of fake actions, Pocan appeared very impatient and suddenly interrupted these small gestures, pressing further, "Moi, please answer my question. I only have 5 minutes for questioning. Who exactly pays the tariffs? Mr. Minister, please, this question is very simple." Pocan turned to the meeting chair and said, "I hope he can answer my question, but he keeps evading the issue." Pro-Republican reports describe Bessent as continuing to be vague, and his voice even trembled a bit. He said, "Well, Mr. Congressman, if those congressmen are those exporters, and they don't like tariffs, then why do they, I think you still want me to say..." At this point, Pocan interrupted him again, saying, "Do you remember what my question was? I'm not sure if you remember, I was asking who pays the tariffs." Cornered, Bessent stiffly uttered a few simple words saying, "This is a very complex issue." At this point, Pocan completely lost his patience and directly requested to reclaim his questioning time. Then he answered his own question, saying, "The tariffs aren't paid by the public, are they?" Bessent then quietly said, "No, no, no." Pocan ignored him, repeatedly saying 3 times that he was reclaiming his questioning time, and accused Bessent, saying, "Clearly, you don't intend to answer, and I don't want to waste any more time listening to your rambling." According to the full video released online after a fruitless exchange with Bessent, Pocan didn't let it go and returned to the initial question, saying, I'll ask again, Mr. Minister, who exactly pays the tariffs? This time, Bessent finally stopped his evasive talk, but he was still being evasive. He responded by saying, "History will show at different times who exactly bears the tariffs. This is a complex situation involving multiple factors." Pocan immediately urged him, saying that Bessent actually knows full well that the tariffs are paid by the exporting country, but this is just self-deceptive rhetoric. This is exactly where the problem lies. He said, "You are a well-educated person with an impressive resume, but you can't answer the question of who bears the tariffs because you simply don't want to answer." He further said that you keep deflecting by saying it's a complex issue, but in reality, it is not. It is the consumers who are paying more due to Trump's tariffs, and that is the fact. Pocan also criticized Trump's tariff policy for being inconsistent, saying that tariffs are raised one moment and cancelled the next, creating a lot of confusion. "I compare it to a saddle that keeps shifting. You never know where it will land, and this is what concerns me as a small business owner." The conclusion is that Bessent's performance really hit home. Additionally, Wall Street welcomed the news of the talks, and the mainstream American media paid close attention to the meeting, believing that this first face-to-face meeting between China and the US since the tariff war began will determine the future of the global economy. CNN reported that the high tariffs imposed by the Trump administration on China have already had a significant impact on US imports and exports. Data from Flexport, a logistics and freight forwarding company, shows that the number of cargo ships departing from China to the US in April decreased by 60%. JP Morgan estimates that by the second half of this year, China's exports to the US could decrease by 80%. Flexport's CEO Ryan Peterson told CNN that a 60% reduction in container numbers means a 60% reduction in arriving goods as well. It's just a matter of time before they deplete their existing inventory. Then you will see product shortages, and at that point you will see prices rise. Several industry insiders have warned that in a few weeks, US consumers will face either price increases or shortages of some products. Gene Soroka, executive director of the Port of Los Angeles, also said that their port initially expected 80 cargo ships to arrive in May, but 20% of those ships have already been cancelled. He said that compared to the same period last year, our shipping volume this week has decreased by 23%. The cargo ships arriving now are the first batch after tariffs were imposed on China and other regions, which is why the volume of goods is so low. It was pointed out that the high-level economic and trade talks between China and the United States have attracted significant attention from global businesses and consumers, and any efforts to ease the situation will be seen as a positive sign. The future of the global economy depends on the negotiations between the two countries. For businesses and consumers, even if China and the United States do not reach any agreement in Switzerland, the fact that the two countries can meet face-to-face is encouraging. Wendy Cutler, vice president of the Asia Society Policy Institute and former US trade official, told the Associated Press that the upcoming talks are a positive development, providing an important opportunity for preliminary negotiations on lifting some tariffs, planning the way forward, and raising concerns. "We should not expect quick results, as this process will take time." Newsweek pointed out that Trump attempted to bring manufacturing back to the US, but his tariff policies only had the opposite effect, weakening US growth. Amid growing domestic concerns about the economy, the Trump administration announced plans to meet with Chinese officials, which could indicate a US intention to ease tensions with China. Bloomberg stated that the tariff war has deeply unsettled the market and could potentially drive up the prices of manufacturing equipment and many domestic goods in the US. US investor Tudor Jones expects that Trump might cut tariffs on China by half, but he warns that this would still not be enough to prevent a decline in the US stock market. The Washington Post pointed out that regardless of the outcomes of the talks, the initiation of contact between China and the US has still brought relief to the global financial markets. Prasad, a professor at Cornell University, stated that the tariff war has already caused turmoil in the global trade market. Even if an agreement is not more likely to be reached, easing tensions would still bring economic and political benefits to all parties involved. In summary, the traditional mainstream media in the United States have responded positively to the initiation of contact between China and the US, without interpreting it as China backing down. On the contrary, based on insights from the American industry, if the tariff war continues, it would be disastrous for the US, as the American economy cannot withstand prolonged conflict. These are pragmatic and rational voices from the American industry, which align with the Chinese statement that all parties hope for contact between China and the US. However, whether any results can be achieved depends, of course, on the willingness of the Trump administration to genuinely negotiate. After a month of strong countermeasures, the diplomatic community believes that China holds more leverage.